Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Batra, page 28b, part 2, with the words Achla Talasa Pere Bitlasa Yomi. The Gemara asks, based on this, if he profited from the field by consuming 3 fruits within 3 consecutive days, for example, the fruits of a caper bush, whose fruits ripen day after day, that should be sufficient to establish the presumption of ownership, as all 3 fruits were not ripe concurrently. The Gemara answers, there, with regard to the caper bush, at least the fruit is here, and it is in the process of finishing its ripening during the 3 days. This is not similar to the goring ox, where each goring is fully independent of the others. The Gemara challenges, based on this, if he profited from the field by consuming 3 fruits within 30 days, for example, alfalfa, which quickly regrows when cut, and which is repeatedly cut over a short period of time, that should be sufficient to establish the presumption of ownership. The Gemara explains what are the circumstances where it could regrow 3 times within 30 days, where it grows a little and he cuts and consumes it, where it grows a little more and he consumes it, such that he cuts it 3 times within 30 days. There he is seizing and consuming the alfalfa, which is not the normal way of farming it, and consequently he does not establish the presumption of ownership, which is established only through standard use of the land. The Gemara challenges, based on this, if he profited from the field consuming 3 fruits within 3 months, for example, alfalfa, where he did employ the standard method of harvesting it, that should be sufficient to establish the presumption of ownership. The Gemara explains, who are they who travel to Usha, whose opinion is under discussion? It is Rabbi Ishmael. Indeed, according to Rabbi Ishmael, this would establish the presumption of ownership. This is, as we learned in the Mishnah, that Rabbi Ishmael says, in what case is this statement that 18 months are required for a non-irrigated field said, with regard to a white field, in other words, a grain field, with regard to a field of trees? Once he gathered his produce and then harvested his olives and then gathered his figs, these 3 harvests are the equivalent of 3 years. Rabbi Ishmael is of the opinion that 3 harvests are sufficient. The Gemara asks, according to the rabbis who hold that 3 years and not 3 harvests are required to establish the presumption of ownership, what is the source for the concept of this type of presumptive ownership? Rav Yosef said that it is written in the verse detailing the purchase of a field from Hanamel by Jeremiah, his cousin, during the time of the siege of Eretz Yisrael. Men shall buy fields for money and subscribe the deeds and seal them. Jeremiah 32:44. This describes the writing of a bill of sale to serve as proof of ownership of the field. Since he was unable to remain living there for 3 years to establish the presumption of ownership, as the prophet Jeremiah stood in the 10th year of Zedekiah's reign and warned people to write bills of sale for the 11th year, when Eretz Yisrael would be overrun. Consequently, despite the fact that one purchasing a field there would be able to live on the land for 2 years, this would not be sufficient to establish the presumption of ownership, which is why he said they should have bills of sale written. Abaye said to him, "Perhaps there he merely teaches us good advice, that it is advisable to have documents to preclude the need to present witnesses that can attest that one had been living on the land. This is not proof that the presumption of ownership cannot be established in less than 3 years."